שמח שהצטרפתם אלינו, מבחינתי זה מאוד מרגש לראות את קהל, אנחנו נפגשנו אתמול, הוא בחור מרתק, אני בטוח שגם אתם תחשבו ככה. אני רק אגיד שבסוף אנחנו נשאיר זמן לשאלות מהקהל, מי שרוצה לשאול שאלה, שישלח לי אותה בטוויטר, את עומר קר, O-M-E-R-K-A, ובסוף אנחנו נשאיר זמן לשאלה 2.
Hello. Okay.
נמרוד, take it away. That's right. So I think what people are most bothered about here is the invite system, and I wonder if you can arrange a few invites for the people in the audience to get the device, because I'm hearing a lot about it since we announced you coming. Can you get me an invite? So can you get us an invite?
Of course, but the invite system only supports shipping to the US right now, so if we give you guys invites, you have to buy it to the US or Europe, and then find a friend to help you bring it over here. If that's okay, everyone can get invites.
So some people are pretty frustrated from the invite system. How hard is it to get your a OnePlus phone? So do you plan to keep using that system even if you become a bigger company in the future?
I think that's a question that we're always asking ourselves internally. So right now we've come to a point where people are interested in technology know about us, but how do we make a more mainstream audience also be able to buy the phone? I don't think my mom would go through a lot of hoops to get an invite to them buy the OnePlus phone. So actually we don't really know ourselves what the next step is. We know that this current model is not going to scale to 10%, 20% market share.
Now, you've been in Israel just about 24 hours. You've been to Tel Aviv, been to Jerusalem. Any impression of the people around you? Like, did people talk with you about your company, about technology in Israel?
I've learned shalom. I think overall the people here are very tech enthusiastic. They know, and they're very connected to the rest of the world, so they know everything that's happening. So I don't know if you guys know, but Israel actually has the world's second per capita search traffic for OnePlus, and it's insane because we haven't even launched our product officially here.
Yeah, can you speculate why your products are so popular in Israel?
I think it's more and more now due to the internet, social media, and word of mouth that the word travels really fast globally. So if you have a product that's popular in the US, everyone else can read about it, everyone understands English. I think that's what happened. Similar to India, we got a lot of requests from India before we finally entered the market, and now it's one of our biggest markets. But I think it's because the world is becoming more and more connected, and a good word travels really fast.
And you mentioned India is your biggest market, and yesterday you told us your biggest market are India, the US, Europe. China is not one of the biggest markets. It's quite unusual for a Chinese company that China is not its biggest market. How did you break this sort of Chinese barrier or Chinese wall to be really successful globally?
I think in the end it's still due to the product, but something that we think a little bit differently about is we've never seen ourselves as a Chinese company. So from the very beginning, we had a team of people from all over the world, and today I think we have more than 15 countries represented in our HQ office. We also have different offices in other countries like India and Europe and in Taiwan, for instance. So I think that mindset helps a lot. So from the very beginning, we launched in 16, 17 countries globally. And I think, again, it comes back to the internet, the social media. Like today, more than any time in the world before, you can start a company to be born global.
Were there other countries that you were surprised from the way your products were received, or when you shipped for the first time?
Every country has been a surprise because I remember when we were talking about starting this company, and although our goal has always been to make the best products and provide great service, we still have to place orders from our suppliers to be able to make phones. So I remember asking our CEO, so what's our goal for the coming year? How many phones should we sell? And I think and he told me like, oh, that's not our primary concern, like sales figures, but if we had to set a number, let's say 50,000, that would be a really good year. And the first year we sold almost 1 million devices. So in that sense, every country has been a huge surprise for us.
Now, let's speak about your phone. This is the main issue here. They are constantly rated as one of the best in the market, in the same league as the iPhone or Galaxy S, yet they are considerably cheaper. So what's your secret? What do you know that companies like Apple, Samsung, huge company, a lot of engineers, a lot of knowledge, don't know? How do you do it?
There's a huge pressure because in the beginning, before we had a product, there was no expectations on us. If we succeeded, we succeeded. If we failed, no one would even know. But now people and our fans especially, they're starting to compare us to Apple and Samsung. They're starting to expect that we can challenge them. But as a 2-year-old company, I think that's extremely hard. I think one of the main differences in our time is that consumers are a lot smarter. They can read reviews online. They can tell their friends about a good product. So increasingly, a company cannot depend on a big marketing budget, but rather depend on a great product. And I think that's where we got lucky with the OnePlus One. We made a product that we thought was good, but then the market also really liked. So I think that's one of the differences, by utilizing more social media and the word of mouth.
Yes, but how did you manage to make such a good product, such a really excellent product? I think we rated it as one of the best smartphones of the year, with considerably lower price point than the iPhone or the Samsung Galaxy S.
So I wouldn't say that iPhones and Galaxies are bad products, but I think one of the things we are known for a lot is that we have a more reasonable price. But I think there's a little bit misunderstanding, because that's never been the goal for us. The goal was never to be like, hey, let's start a company and sell cheap phones, because everyone around the world can make cheap phones. The difference between us, I think, is our phones are actually not cheap. They're probably more expensive to make than the Galaxy or the iPhone. Our scale is very small, and we also have the latest and very expensive components. The reason why our prices are more reasonable is maybe due to the business model. We're selling directly to consumer via e-commerce. This way you save a lot of the retail margin costs. And our marketing budget is very slim, so we have to find creative ways of getting people to know about us. And also, we don't need to make that much money. We don't have to have a lot of margin left over for ourselves.
Because you're a very small company.
We were a very small company, but today we're around 900 people.
Still relatively small.
Comparatively pretty small.
Yes. Well, look, for Israeli customers, the prices of your products are still higher than what you can buy the OnePlus in the United States and closer to the other flagship phones. Can Israeli customer expect over time that the local price will get closer to what American customers pays for your products?
So in different countries, there are different operational costs of doing business. I think in Israel, there's around 33% additional cost, customs and tax and duties and VAT. So I think that's what's making the price a little bit more than other markets. If you look at other flagship smartphones, if you compare the US list price to the local price here, there's also a gap. So we will always try and act in the best interest of our fans and consumers, but I cannot make any promises of how the laws and the regulations are going to change.
When you spoke yesterday, you said you believe the next few years will be pretty tough for smartphone makers, and included yourself in that. So, and the reason you said it that you believe that many smaller players will be thrown out of business. So how do you plan to survive the constraint in the market in the coming years?
I think the main thing is still to try your best and make the best product. And the second thing is to try and grow in a more sustainable way. I think a lot of startups, especially hardware, it's very easy to go bankrupt, not due to a lack of sales, but due to an excess of inventory. And some people have been criticizing us about the invite system, but in reality, it's a way for us to grow in a slower, more safe, and more controllable manner. So for us, we would always choose a more sustainable type of business growth rather than one that can risk our company of going bankrupt. So I think this philosophy will continue to be one of the guiding forces behind our company, and hopefully we can survive the next few years.
I hope so too.
Yeah. What are the main differences between the OnePlus products and phones made by other Chinese companies like Huawei or Xiaomi? And products and the company, the way you do business?
I think if I had to say a difference, so first of all, internally, we really don't look that much to the market and see what other people are doing. Because at this point, I think we're so small that the choices we make will impact us much more than what competition is doing. But sure, a lot of people would make comparisons and try to kind of analyze our situation compared to other companies. If I had to say something, it would be that over 80% of our users are non-Chinese users around the world. So when we design and develop products, we have to design it with the entire world in mind. I think that might be one of the differences, but I'm sure that these companies you mentioned also have really great products.
In the global market, there's sort of a bias against Chinese phone. When you say someone who bought a Chinese phone, usually think like a cheap, not very high quality phone, and you really managed to break out of this concept, out of this bias. How were you able to do that?
I think one of the things is still to not see ourselves necessarily as a Chinese company. So one of the ideas we had is to never have a cultural barrier to your user base. Always communicate with them in their language or their culture. So that's why we have a staff from all over the world. I don't know if that answers your question.
Do you think what you did helped create a better image for Chinese smartphones all around? Or do you think the way other Chinese companies are treating their products and the level of quality that they keep might still damaging what you're trying to do?
Not necessarily. Recently, I wrote a guest blog on TechCrunch where I tried to make the point that it's time to stop looking at countries as much. A company today can be born global. Your market is the entire world, and I think a lot of Israeli startups also see it this way. The local market is relatively small, so you have to just reach out to the entire world from the very beginning. So in that sense, I don't really see that a company needs to belong to a certain country. It belongs to the world.
רק אזכיר, just remind you, if you have a question for Carl, you can tweet at me at Omer Carl. We'll leave time for questions from the others in the end. So it's at OMERKA. Already got a few interesting questions. Carl, in an interview published today in Kלכליסט, you said you haven't touched your iPad for about 3 years. And we already seen like the tablet market sort of like petering away. Do you believe that companies like Apple, Samsung, Google, etc., are just wasting time trying to make tablets happen?
So personally, I haven't used a tablet. I think one of the reasons why, and you can look at the sales trends for tablets, it's kind of stagnant or dropping. I think it's due to the large screen smartphones. So in the beginning, smartphones were 3.5 inches, and it was really hard to consume more long-form content. But over the years, people have been increasingly accepting a larger screen smartphone. So I think the OnePlus One at 5.5 inches also helped to push that trend. So when you have a device that's 5.5 inches, you no longer need a dedicated tablet. So I'm really not sure of what's going to happen in the future with the tablet industry. It's just right now, it's not something good for us to focus on.
What about wearables, smartwatches? Did you have a chance to play with the Apple Watch or any of those kind of products? Do you think it's an interesting market?
So currently, I haven't seen a product that I would use. I've purchased a few products. I actually got one of the early backers for the new Pebble as well. But after using it for one day, I gave it away on my Twitter account. So I haven't found a smartwatch that's useful yet. Internally, we've also been experimenting with a lot of different products. We were almost going to release a fitness tracker. We had Bluetooth speakers. We had a lot of different things. But that was from a time when our focus wasn't very clear. So I think as a company, you really need to focus, especially when you're small, on nailing one thing. So we've cut all those projects, and we're going to focus on making the best smartphones the world has seen. But as you know, software is also becoming more and more important. So once we have a lot of users on our software platform, then we're more open with working with other companies instead. We don't think we can make the best smartwatch, but why not work with a company that can? And we can share the platform together and work together, so you don't have to compete with everyone. Instead, find partnerships that add value to everyone. Because in the end, consumers, they also want choice. They don't want their entire home or their entire life to be OnePlus branded.
What would be your main advice for a young startup trying to compete in a saturated market against big name players in the way you did?
I think it's not very healthy to always read startup advice and always go network and read books and stuff. I think in the end, business hasn't changed. Business has always been about having the better product compared to competitors and treating your users better than your competitors. So that's always been the case, and you see it now. There was a huge craze with consumer internet, mobile apps, but now it's all commoditized. Hardware everyone can make, software everyone can make. In the end, it's who can make the better product and who can treat their users best. That's always been the case. And I hope people will start focusing on the fundamentals of business.
Now, I know you prefer to be very secretive about your future products. I know I tried to get some information out of you, and you didn't want to tell me anything. But is there anything you can share with the audience about your next move, some of your next products, future plans?
I think one of the challenges for OnePlus is how can we become culturally relevant? And in my mind, in consumer electronics, there's only been two companies that have succeeded before, one being Beats and one being Apple. And by culturally relevant, you don't have to pursue the same way of reaching out. You don't have to pay big sponsorships or do big marketing campaigns. So maybe people here have heard the example, a certain headphone brand sponsored a US Olympics team to use their product, but they instead use Beats because they like Beats much more. So for us, the challenge is, how can we be more than just a piece of hardware? How can we become more relevant for people and touch their lives? So I think that's going to be our future direction.
Okay. And we have just time for a few short questions from the audience. So Avi Mizrahi asks, how can a new startup get suppliers to offer costs competitive with the giants?
How can we start this business and be cost efficient?
How do you get suppliers to offer you competitive prices that enable you to compete with big players that obviously their volume is much bigger?
So first of all, our prices are not competitive. So that's pretty painful for us. We know that we are paying a lot more for the components. And secondly, a lot of our executives, including our CEO, he used to work in the industry for a while, so we already had these connections. I think it will be very hard for someone without any experience in the industry to say, hey, today I'm going to start a new smartphone company. So to summarize, it will be the connections that we already had, and also that the prices are really not that competitive at this scale.
And one last question from Aiden Spiegel. What was some of the toughest engineering problem your team faced early on?
Engineering problems?
Yeah.
I think the toughest problem here was, if you ask users what they want everything. But really finding the underlying reason to why they want something, and then maybe solving it at the root, but not necessarily by just listening to the user, that was the hardest decision, to decide what feedback to listen to, what feedback to modify. This curated approach to product management, I think this was the hardest point. That's for the first phone in the beginning. I think for the second phone, the OnePlus 2, it's the inclusion of all the new technologies. So we have a USB Type-C port, which is one of the first smartphones with a USB Type-C, state-of-the-art fingerprint scanner, etc. A lot of, like, some of the best camera sensors, laser focus, optical image stabilization. Once you include a lot of different new technology, the time to market and the testing and the quality assurance, everything will take longer. So for us, the second phone took 15 months to develop. So there was a 15-month period between the first phone and the second one. Whereas for a normal company, normal smartphone company, this cycle is usually 10 to 12 months. So that obviously impacted us financially by quite a lot.
Great. This is all the time we have. Thank you, Carl. It was really
Thank you.
interesting.